Today we're going to talk about factoring trinomials where a does not equal 1. All right, so everything else that we've seen so far has either had a GCF or had an a value of 1, meaning the leading coefficient, the first thing we see here is 1. But today we're going to talk about what we're going to do when there's not a 1 there, something else. So if we have 2y squared plus 5y plus 2, the first thing we're still doing is looking for a GCF. So 2, 5, 2, those all don't have something in common, and all three terms don't have a y. So there's no GCF, which means we need to start our process of factoring. Now, today we're going to focus on the method of guess and check, okay? Which means we're going to semi-guess and check, so educationally guess, we'll say, and then check our answers to see if they work. So before, when it was just a y squared there, we knew that the first two terms needed to multiply to give us that y squared. So we would use y and y. Well, now that the first two terms need to multiply to give us 2y squared, what numbers can we use to multiply to give us 2y squared? So that means that we're going to have to use 2y, oh, and not another 2y. 2y and y, all right? And these back two spaces are going to have to multiply to give us 2, just like they did in our previous questions. So the only options that we have are 1 and 2. So we have to figure out, we have to educationally guess and check, do we want it to be 1 here and 2 over here? Or do we want 2 to be on the left and 1 to be on the right? Okay, so we're going to guess something, keeping in mind that once we multiply these together, we want the middle terms to add to give us 5y. So if we guess the 2 to go first and the 1 to go second, and we check this, so that would give us 2y squared plus 2y plus 2y plus 2. Do those terms in the middle give us 5y? No, they don't. So that doesn't work. And if you're using a pencil, which I would suggest, then you could just erase those things, okay? You wouldn't have to cross everything out. So again, we know it's got to be 2y and y. So let's make this be 1 and 2. So now if we check, 2y times y is 2y squared. 2y times 2 is 4y. 1 times y is y. And 1 times 2 is 2. And these middle terms do add together to give us 5y. So this is our correct answer, okay? So going back up to this one for a moment, we also know that this shouldn't be an option for us because as we get going with these things, because you notice how you have 2 and 2 inside that same parenthesis. That means if there's a GCF here, there was a GCF in the original equation, which we knew there was not. So we kind of could educationally know that we shouldn't even guess this one in the future. Okay, so this is our answer. All right, let's move on to the next one. So we have 2n squared plus n minus 3. I would also say, keeping in mind those rules that we talked about of what types of signs you're going to be looking for could also be beneficial in this as well. So again, we've got 2n squared. The only way to get that is to have 2n and n. Next, we have these back two terms have to multiply to give us a negative 3. So the only way to do that is to have 1 and 3, and obviously we know that one of them needs to be negative. So let's think about this before we actually write some stuff down. If we have 2 here, and we put the 1 here and the 3 over here, and if you have a pencil, that's perfectly fine for you to go ahead and write that in. That means that I would be taking 2 times 3 eventually and getting 6, and 1 times n would give me 1, and 6 and 1 aren't going to give me 1. So I don't want to put the 3 over here. I want to put the 3 with the 2 so that it doesn't have to be multiplied by that. So we have 3 and 1. All right, so now we got to figure out what our signs are going to be for this. So this would give us 2n, and this would give us 3n. And so for this to be a positive 1, we want the 3n to be positive and the 1n to be negative. So a lot of this could just be stuff that you're doing in your head. You don't actually have to guess something on your paper, but you should be checking it, okay? Again, that work of checking could be in your head as well. So 2n times n is 2n squared. 2n times negative 1 is negative 2n. 3 times n is 3n. and 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. When we combine those like terms in the middle, we do get a positive 1n. Remember, if there's no number there, it's a 1. And so this does work. Okay? So this is the general process right now that we're working on, guess and check. All right, so next one here, we have 3x squared minus 13x plus 10. So we're moving into things that might have a few more factors or options for us to use. No GCF, 3, 13, 10 don't share anything in common. They don't have an x in common. So the only way to get 3x squared is to have 3x and x. All right, our options to multiply to give us 10, we have 1 times 10 or 2 times 5. Okay. Now it is a minus plus, so we do know for a fact that those are both negative, and we're trying to get negative 13. So if I choose the 2 and the 5, I'm looking at that for a moment, and I put the 2 here and the 5 here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that. 2 here, 5 here. This gives me negative 15 and negative 2. You're going to be really tempted to say that that works, but negative 15 minus 2 is not negative 13. So we cannot use those. Okay. So if we put the 5 over here and the 2 over here, that would give us 6 and 5, which would only be negative 11. That's not going to work. So that means we have to use the 1 and 10. So if I put the 10 over here, educationally, I know that I shouldn't be choosing that because that would give us 3 times 10, negative 10, which would give us negative 30, and then this would be negative 1. So that's not going to work. We want the 10 to go in with the 3x and the 1 to go over with just the single x. Checking this, we get 3x squared minus 3x minus 10x and plus 10. So those middle terms do combine to give us the 13x, and we're good to go. Okay, so this is our answer. Again, this process is going to be easier as you practice more and more questions, and it's also going to be easier the more you know your math facts. Okay, so guess and check is a big one with knowing your math facts. All right, next question, 2w squared plus w minus 28. So the only way to get that 2w squared is to have 2w and w. Factors of 28, we got lots of them. We got 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 4 and 7 are the ones to use. Okay, so we know that we're trying to get a 1 here. That means that if I'm thinking of those different factors, at some point I'm going to have to multiply something by 2. So I have 1 times 28, 2 times 14, or 4 times 7. So at some point I'm going to have to multiply something by 2 with this. So if I multiply 2 times 1 and use the 28, that's not going to work. 2 times 2 and 14, that's not going to work to give me a 1. 2 times 4 could give me 8. And then 7, could I use those in some way, shape, or form to give me 1? So those are the ones I want. So I need to take 2 times the 4, and then this 1 times this 7. And if I want to get a positive 1, I need this 8w to be positive and the 7w to be negative. So that means if we check it, 2w squared plus 8w minus 7w minus 28, those two combine properly, and so we're good to go. All right, next one, we have 5d squared minus 14d minus 3. So this is really nice and easy when they have prime numbers on both ends, because it just means that there's that fewer amount of different things to try. So we know that we need 5d and d. So if we have 5d squared, the first two spaces have to be 5d and d. Since it's minus minus, we know that we need one of each sign. We're not exactly sure what it is yet. To get this negative 3, our only options are to use 1 and 3. So thinking here, at some point I'm going to have to multiply by 5. If I multiply 5 by the 1, that's only going to give me 5, and then 3, that's not going to give us negative 14. So we want to use the 3 to multiply by the 5 to give us 15, and then 1 multiplies by 1 to get 1. So to get this negative 14, we do want this 3 to be negative and the 1 to be positive. And you don't have to write out your work to check. So here 5d times d is 5d squared. 5d times negative 3 is negative 15d. 1 times d is d, and 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. So that negative 15 plus 1 does give us the negative 14d. And that's our answer. Okay, let's look at another one. We've got 2 more to look at here. So for this question, we have 6x squared plus 23x plus 7. This is the first question where we have a composite number as the leading coefficient. Okay, so all of the other ones have had prime numbers of 2, 3, or 5 so far. So it could be the case that it's 6x and x, or it could be the case that it's 3x and 2x. So I'm actually going to start with the fact that we have a 7 in the back. We know this should be plus 1 and plus 7. That's the only way to get 7. If we have plus plus, we know they're both positive. So thinking to myself, if I have 6x here and x, that would give me 42, which is way bigger than what I need. So I don't want that. If I put 6x over here and the 1x, that would give me 6 and 7, which is only 13, not 23. So we don't want to use 6x and x. We want to use 3x and 2x. So do I want to have 2x and 3x? So that would give me 14 and another 3, which is not enough. So that means that we want the 3x to go with the 1 and the 2x to go with the 7. That would give us 6x squared plus 21 plus another 2 is 23x, and then plus 7. Okay. Last question we have, 18p squared minus 12p minus 6. So for this question, we notice that 18, negative 12, negative 6 all have a 6 in common. So we're going to take out a GCF. This is combining in GCFs and factoring with a leading coefficient other than 1. We're going to divide each of those coefficients by that 6. So we have 3p squared minus 2p minus 1. That 6 GCF is just going to hang out front. 3p squared, the only way to get that is 3p and p. The only way to get 1 is 1 and 1. So now we just have to figure out the signs that when we multiply these together, we'll get a negative 2. Okay, so here, I want this to be a negative 3p and a positive p to give us the negative 2. And so then that would be our answer. So with this, just to recap here, okay, if we have these 2 spaces, or these 2 parentheses, these first 2 numbers should multiply to be a, that leading coefficient. These back 2 spaces should multiply to c. Okay, it's going to multiply to be whatever that last number is. And then these 2 spaces in the middle are going to add to b, right? Whatever that middle number is. And again, this is assuming that you've already taken out a GCF in this process. And that's it.